1370 WOCA.
Ocala.
All right, 6 minutes after 9 o'clock. Thank you for tuning in. You know, Robin, we interview governors, senators. We've had some very, very famous authors on, some very famous musicians, some very famous actors, actresses, right?
Yep.
I don't think I've ever received more calls about a segment than the one we're about to do. And it is about radio, old radio. And I'll be honest with you, I have been looking forward to this one as well. There's just something about... And I'm glad that just because I'm in radio, you would think, well, okay, well, Larry, you work in radio, so no wonder you're interested in radio. But apparently a lot of you out there are interested in radio, too. Well, you listen to it.
Yeah.
And by the way, I am a big fan of listening to radio. Cynthia B. Meyers is on the phone. She is an associate professor of communication at the College of Mount St. Vincent in New York City. And she's written a book. It's called A Word from Our Sponsor, Ad Men, Advertising, and the Golden Age of Radio. And she sent me 3 old ads that we're going to play during the course of this interview. So this is a topic everybody's interested in. A fascinating topic, old radio. Ocala got its first station in 1939. Mm-hmm. And of course, that station's long since gone. But I remember reading the newspaper article about the big debut of this new thing in Ocala.
Yeah, right.
And they had a live piano player on staff. Mm-hmm. You know, I guess just play piano
cool.
at points. Cynthia Meyers. Good morning, Cynthia.
Hi, good morning.
How are you?
I'm great. Thanks for having me.
So was this book fun for you to write?
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. I learned a lot about the history of American culture and American radio, and I basically learned that the advertising industry helped invent radio.
Is that interesting? So in what way? Radio wouldn't exist if it wasn't for advertising. That's kind of fair to say, right?
Well, right, but at first nobody really knew what the business model was going to be. They were broadcasting things, but they couldn't charge the audience to listen to the program.
Right.
And finally, broadcasters figured out they could just sell or rent the airtime, and the advertisers would produce the program. So from very early on, the advertisers produced their own programs. But then the advertisers didn't really know how to produce programs. And so they turned to their advertising agencies because they trusted the advertising agencies to combine the entertainment and the advertising in order to help them sell their products.
Oh, wow.
So what happened was that a lot of advertising agencies invented programs. Like the soap opera was invented by advertising agencies.
For soap companies, I'm guessing, right? That's why we call it soap operas? Really?
Exactly. So Procter & Gamble, they make lots of different kinds of soap, like Ivory soap and Tide and Oxydol. And what they did is they hired an advertising agency who created serials, which are programs that the story never ends. You know,
Wow.
you have to tune in next time to find out what happened.
Right.
And they did that on purpose to get people to tune in the next day to hear the ad again. And then what I discovered, I did a lot of archival research. I learned that they created...
Whoop, you fell out. Are you still there? Cynthia? Oh, tell him.
Blackett Sample.
Okay.
Yeah, Blackett Sample Humpert. They tried to do reason why ads, and they did reason why soap operas.
Okay, and it sounds like that's the model, the advertising or the business model that TV took as well. I remember Texaco Theater. Was that right? Texaco?
Yes, Texaco, yeah.
Am I remembering that
Yes.
right? Was that radio or was that TV or both?
Well, it was both, and what happened when television started is they carried on the radio system where the advertiser produced the program through their ad agency, but the problem was that television was much more expensive than radio. With radio, all you needed was a script and a microphone. But with television, you need costumes and sets and lights and cameras, and basically it was unaffordable. Sponsors, instead of spending a couple $1,000s to produce a radio show, would have to spend tens of thousands of dollars. And so the sponsorship system had to change, and networks took over programming and started selling shorter amounts of time to advertisers, like 1 minute. as opposed to an hour.
Oh, really? Now, let's look at this for a second, the length of time, because and we do this every day, we write ads. And when we write a short ad, it's almost like you have to be a poet.
Yeah.
Because you have a tiny little piece of time that you have to get something that's descriptive. And maybe that's all I need to say right there. I could imagine if you had long form, and we do long form as well. We do what we now call infomercials.
Yeah.
Where people talk about their product for a half hour.
Mm-hmm.
Right, and the advertisers consider their entire program to be an infomercial. So, and also in the early days of radio, they weren't really sure if people were listening, and so they did a lot of repetition. And they would say the same thing over and over again. So one of the commercials that I sent you is from Ma Perkins, and that was a soap opera. It was sponsored by Procter & Gamble and produced by Blackett Sample Hummert. And in it, they use what are called hard sell reason why advertising strategies, where they talk about Ma Perkins and then they say over and over and over again what's good about the product. And it's very long. You might not want to play the whole thing. It's about 2 minutes.
Yeah, I
but
see it.
you can hear them say it over and over because they were really worried that people weren't listening.
Okay, and I do have a comment about one of the other ones, but let me play this one first. This is the Ma Perkins Oxidol ad, and you're right. It's 2 minutes and 7 seconds long. I won't play the whole thing, but we'll get a feel for it right here. And I'll keep your pot turned up, so if you want to interject something, we'll be able to chat. Here's the old ad from Ma Perkins. What year was this? Do you know?
This is sometime in the mid-30s.
In the mid-30s, okay. See, we didn't even get a station here in this town. I mean, I wasn't here. I wasn't even born.
Yeah.
But Ocala's first station was 1939. When did radio first go on the air? Do we know that?
The mid-20s.
Mid-20s.
1926 is when NBC was founded.
Okay, here we go. Here's the old Ma Perkins Oxidol ad.
Oxidol known Ma Perkins again. The true life story of a woman whose life is the same, whose surroundings are the same, whose problems are the same as those of thousands of other women in the world today. A woman who spent all her life taking care of her home, washing and cooking and cleaning and raising her family. And now her husband's death puts her head foremost into being the head of the family as well as the mother. And we'll hear her true life story every day at the same time except Saturday and Sunday. Before we hear from our Perkins today, though, I want to tell you about something else for a minute that will be of vital interest to every housewife listening. About a remarkable new laundry soap discovery that actually makes any other kind of laundry soap old-fashioned and out of date. It's the new, improved Oxidol, spelled O-X-Y-D-O-L, Oxidol. It embodies the latest scientific discovery of the world's greatest soap makers, the Procter & Gamble Company. Whatever soap you've been using in the past, whether it's a granulated soap, a soap flake, or a bar soap, you owe it to yourself to try this new, improved Oxidol.
All right, I'll cut off right there.
So you're getting this one?
Yeah. You know
Her husband's dead.
What's interesting, her husband dies. She's the head of the household. But before we tell you about that, let me tell you about some soap. Now, I'm assuming that the clarity that we're hearing, in other words, the lack of clarity, is only because the recording technology was poor. I'm guessing the broadcast technology was probably clear. Am I right?
Well, it was all AM. There was no FM then. And yes, the recording technology was not great. They used these transcriptions, like wax discs. And also, that's just an MP3 that I pulled off the internet, so it's not a high-quality recording.
Okay.
But yes, there was a lot of static in early AM. But you just heard just a fraction of the ad, which went on for 2 minutes. And it was all about the product. So you heard the word soap,
yeah, right.
clean, and then they spell it out loud a lot of times, O-X-Y-D-O-L. And this was all because they were worried that people wouldn't understand. And so the soap operas were the same way. If anybody has heard any of these old radio soap operas, they're very slow and repetitive. They were designed that way on purpose. And in fact, people criticized this radio programming for being kind of condescending to their audiences, but the people who were making them and the ad agencies were doing it on purpose because they wanted to make sure that the housewives, while they were doing their dishes, were also able to understand.
I have a question about the desire to be part of these programs, and we know this from even today. If an advertiser literally owns the entire show, whether it's and I understand what you're saying. They would create these scripts, these soap operas, so that people would want to tune in, and the ulterior motive was to get people to hear about their product. I guess we have something similar now. When an advertiser will sponsor a full hour, for example, they will have their name mentioned in the course of the hour, but they're not necessarily writing the script, especially here on talk radio.
Yeah.
Right. But back in the radio days, they controlled the program.
Isn't that interesting?
So they weren't just financing it; they were deciding on who was going to star in it. They were deciding what kind of program. And what happened was the advertising industry actually became the true producers. They were the production houses, because the client, the sponsor, the advertiser would say, well, we want some kind of soap opera, and they would go to the ad agency, and the ad agency would come up with the idea, the ad agency would hire the actors, the ad agency would write the scripts, the ad agency would oversee the broadcasts. The ad agency would negotiate with the networks over, what time that they were buying.
Right.
The ad agency also would negotiate with the networks over the scripts themselves. So the ad agencies were actually the creators of almost all of those old radio programs.
So let me just use the little fact that I know about our area here, that 1939 was the first radio station. Let me assume, and I could be wrong, but let me assume that many small towns had no radio station until about that same time. Let me assume that we're not unusual in that. So that would mean that there were fewer stations in the first part of the radio days. Were the dollar was the dollar amount? Was there a lot of money in radio, I guess, in the beginning, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. Well, first of all, there were a bunch of high-powered stations, and NBC and CBS created networks out of a lot of those high-powered stations. So it's possible that a lot of the small towns could get reception from some of those high-powered stations. Another thing is that radio was actually very cheap for advertisers, but the networks could make a lot of money. So, in other words, the networks, through their affiliated stations, could reach millions of people all over the country with one broadcast, and then the network could charge the advertiser, like $10,000 for the airtime, and then the advertiser could produce the show for like $3,000, and so for $13,000 they could reach 1 million people, which was a very low cost per 1,000 in terms of getting an advertising message out. So as soon as advertisers started realizing that radio could be very effective for reaching a lot of people at the same time, it kind of exploded. So in the late 20s, radio then, all sorts of programs start showing up. And then by the 30s, during the Depression, when people stopped going to the movies as much and they start turning on the radio, which is free entertainment, then radio just booms. And all sorts of vaudeville stars start appearing on radio, movie stars, music stars, advertisers.
Wow. No wonder it was golden age. Yeah.
Yeah, because it becomes the main form of entertainment for people at home.
But there was also that news element. I mean, didn't it take a drastic turn when the war started?
Yeah, actually there was very little news on radio in the 30s because the newspaper business thought that radio was going to destroy newspapers. So they refused to cooperate with radio stations. And what happened was that the wire services, like AP, they actually boycotted radio stations for a while so that the radio stations couldn't get news easily. And the other problem was that advertisers didn't want to sponsor the news because they were afraid that if somebody heard a story about somebody being murdered, that they didn't really want to hear the story about how great their soap was. So there actually was not that much news on radio in the 30s, and it really only changes during World War II. In the 40s, when companies like CBS start broadcasting, news from Europe about the war, and some sponsors start sponsoring it, but the networks actually started producing more news themselves rather than counting on the sponsors.
Wow, fascinating topic, Cynthia. Just to reintroduce Cynthia, Cynthia Meyers is our guest, Cynthia B. Meyers. She's an associate professor of communications at the College of Mount St. Vincent in New York City. Her book is called A Word from Our Sponsor, Ad Men, Advertising in the Golden Age of Radio. And we've even got some more old ads to play. There's one I want to comment on. Can I play the one I want to comment on?
Sure.
All right, the one I want to comment on is Sal Hepatica.
Yes, okay. So So, can I tell you a little bit about it?
Yeah, tell me about it, because I have something I want to say
Okay.
about the ad itself.
Yeah, so the earlier ad we just heard, which was really repetitive, and they talk about the product the whole time, that was a hard sell agency. There was another agency called Young and Rubicam, which was a soft sell agency, and they believed that all that repetitive hard sell was, alienating to audiences, that audiences got bored and offended and annoyed. And so what they decided to do was, instead of annoying audiences by repeating the product name over and over and over again, they like to use humor. And Fred Allen was a very famous radio comedian. He had a very popular primetime show. And in this segment, he and his announcer pretend to forget the name of the product.
Right.
And so the whole thing is a joke, and it's not until the end that the audience supplies the name of the product. But meanwhile, because most of the listeners know the name of the product, they know what it's supposed to be.
Okay. So being so far removed, I didn't get it. I thought to myself, wow, they're not selling anything here. They keep not saying the name. So you're saying it was such a well-known product at the time that you didn't,
Right.
you kind of didn't need to say it. It would be like Coca-Cola
Well-
in our days, right?
Well, you see, only one product sponsored a program. So Fred Allen's sponsor was a brand called Sal Hepatica. Sal Hepatica was made by Bristol Meyers.
Okay.
And so, and Young and Rubicam was the ad agency. And so the audience knew that Sal Hepatica was the sponsor, and they all knew that the sponsor did a message in the middle of the show. So the joke was that everybody knew that they were supposed to be advertising the
Okay.
product.
No.
So I think it's very clever because it actually imprints the name of the product in an audience which is thinking it rather than hearing it. So if you
Yeah.
want to just play like the last 30 seconds or something of it, you might get a feel for it.
I don't know that I can do that with our computer.
okay.
But let me play the beginning of it anyway, and then
Okay.
we can chat again. I'll keep your pot turned up. This is the ad, the Fred Allen Show, right? That's what the show was?
Yes,
The Fred Allen Show, and the product is Sal Hepatica, which is a laxative, right?
yes.
Yeah.
gosh.
Yeah. Here we go.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, your attention, please. Someone once said that the world stands aside to make way for the man who knows where he's going. And so tonight it gives me great pleasure to make way for a man who knows what he's talking about. Harry Von Zell.
Don't ever neglect the cold. At the very first sign of a cold, get after it immediately with the faster help of what's the name?
Fred Allen, remember?
No. The name of I'm awfully sorry, that eagle has upset me. I can't remember the name of what it is that helps fight cold faster. It slipped my mind.
Well, it'll come to you. Go ahead, Harry.
Well, yes, of course. Ladies and gentlemen, this famous product acts very quickly, yet it's exceptionally gentle. And since the progress of a cold is very fast, the greater speed of what it is I'm talking about is especially important in fighting your cold. And that's not all. This, the name will come to me in a minute. It also helps nature counteract the acidity that so often accompanies a cold. And, ladies and gentlemen, you can check these facts with your own doctor.
You'd better check the name, too, ladies and gentlemen.
Fred, you know what I'm talking about.
Why,
don't you?
certainly, Harry. You're talking about America's outstanding saline laxative.
That's it, Fred. And the name is...
The name is, so many physicians recommend it.
Yes, and it helps fight colds faster. But what is the name?
Well, here's a pretty to-do. Wait, Harry, there must be somebody around here who knows. If there is, would you please tell us confidentially? That's it, Sal Hepatica. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Man.
Oh, I like that one.
So we had to play the whole thing. So Sal Hepatica, a laxative, and it cures colds. Who knew?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, well, they made lots of product claims that were actually not true. And they got criticized for that. But you can see how they're making fun of hard sell advertising.
Yeah.
And they're making a joke out of the ad, which is a very common strategy today. Advertisers today use humor a lot. But back then, it was more unusual.
And it being 2 minutes, too, in length, we try to squeeze things into 30 seconds and make the point.
Yeah.
Right. And that's because back then they thought that the sponsors were paying for 60 minutes, and they thought 2 minutes was not very much time to fit in all their product claims. And today, advertisers realize that audiences are impatient and, want to hear things right away and don't want to wait. So we do things completely differently now.
Wow. When I know that yours is your book is about advertising, but at what point did music take over the show format of radio?
Well, actually, live music was on radio from the very beginning, and it was very popular. But what happened was when television came along, in fact, a lot of variety shows, like the Fred Allen Show we just listened to, had lots of music acts. But what happened was when television came along and radio stopped being the entertainment medium with comedy and drama and music, recorded music was a lot cheaper as programming. And so radio shifted to a talk and recorded music medium and away from live performance, including live music.
Well, Cynthia, we've got about 4 minutes left. I just want to let you know that when we started announcing that you were going to be on this morning, it suddenly got us some emails, some Facebook things, and a couple of phone calls asking if they had missed it. Did we miss it? When did you do that? And we said, no, it's not till Monday. So hopefully the one we're doing right now is being recorded. And for some reason, we love this stuff. Maybe I don't understand why, but we do.
Well, I think it's, when radio was new, it was kind of like the internet of its time.
Yeah.
And they were inventing new things, just as right now we're inventing new ways to use the internet. And I think radio was a very dynamic medium back then.
Even the word radio became such a powerful word. That's why Radio City was like the moniker for New York.
Yeah.
And then, of course, Radio City Music Hall as a result of that, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, well, it was magical. It could reach millions of people at one time, simultaneously. Nothing like that had ever happened before.
All right. Should we play the Ivory Soap one or no? What do you think?
That one is a cast commercial, and advertisers today are doing more of these where characters from like Modern Family and The Middle, which are sitcoms, show up in an ad. And this is just an example of an Ivory Soap ad where the characters from a soap opera called The Gibson Family show up in an ad in which a maid and one of the women in the family is discussing, what soap to use. So if you want to play a little bit of that, you can sort of hear how they did that.
I'll play a little bit of the Ivory Soap ad. Here it is.
And now, before the overture to the second act of the Gibson Family, let's step backstage and look in on Sally Gibson and Hilda, her maid, who is helping Sally change for the next scene.
Quick, Hilda, hold this dress. I've never been so excited in all my life.
It's really wonderful, isn't it, Miss Sally?
Too wonderful. That scene in the garden.
It made me think of Henry, Miss Sally. Miss Sally, if I had your complexion, do you suppose Henry would...
What, Hilda?
Help me, what's wrong with my face, Miss Sally? Those red blotches just won't go away.
Soap, probably. What kind are you using? Some beauty soap, I suppose.
Yes, Miss Sally. That one that promises radiant beauty, glamorous youth, irresistible loveliness. Oh, Miss Sally, I had hoped Henry would...
Yes, so did I once. And then I learned the truth. Hilda, you can't feed the pores of your skin with beauty oils or mysterious ingredients.
No.
And many highly perfumed, prettily colored soaps contain fatty acids and free alkali that really irritate and harm your skin.
But, Miss Sally...
My doctor recommended Ivory. He says all any soap can do is cleanse, and that to protect the fine texture and pores, a soap should cleanse gently. And that to do that, a soap must be pure. He said,
Someone sounds like the Good Witch of the North, doesn't she?
Yeah, Billy Burke. That's who she sounds like.
Yeah. It was interesting. They used a little bit of science there to prove to you that your soap is, the one you're using is going to get your blotchy face and all that bad stuff,
fatty
right?
acids she used.
Yeah.
Yes, that was a hard... That was a hard sell advertising strategy, was to use fake science a lot. Doctors say, scientists say.
Oh, man. Gosh, I've enjoyed the visit. I know our listeners have. Cynthia, the book is called A Word from Our Sponsor. Cynthia's name is Cynthia B. Meyers. She's the author. I have a copy. Cynthia sent us not only those 3 ads, but also a copy of the book. Big paperback book, or soft cover book is, I guess, what they're calling these. So I will give away the copy that I have, so one of you can have it. The number to call is 622-WOCA. The rest of us have to go buy it. Cynthia, do you have a website?
Yes, I do. It's called awordfromOurSponsor.wordpress.com.
Okay.
And, of course, the book is available on Amazon.com.
All right, let me give this one away. Good morning. You've got the book. Who's this?
This is Jim from Anthony.
All right, Jim, you got the book. You were at the mall now, right?
Yes, sir, I do.
Okay, thank you, Jim.
Great program. I love this old ad stuff.
I know, me too. I'm a geek at heart. Well, I'm a geek, period. Thank you, Jim. Appreciate that. Yeah, I don't know what it is. You know, when I'm traveling, I have brought with me sometimes CDs of old radio shows, which include the old radio ads. And I'm glad that they have the ads in there. It's just, for some reason, don't ask me. I don't even understand my own psychology, but it's fun stuff. Cynthia, thank you for doing this. What's in your future? What are you going to do next?
Well, I'm actually working on a project about what happens after radio when television starts and sponsorship finally ends in the 1960s. So I'm going to talk about how the ad industry stopped inventing programs, but they started doing other things instead.
Well, promise that you'll come on radio to talk about TV.
Yes.
I do.
It's easy to do an interview on radio by way of phone, by the way. On TV, you kind of have to put up a still picture of the person speaking or something. Cynthia, thank you. Fun interview, and I know a lot of our listeners were looking forward to it.
All right. Well, thank you so much for having me.
All right. That was fun. All right. We will take a little break, and we will be right back.
Hey, you guys, this is Lou, and if you don't want to be a dirty little bird sitting on the curb eating dirty white wines, you better head on down to Dairy Queen Silver Springs. They got the best, the juiciest, tastiest char-grilled hot dogs, burgers, solid filet of fish and chicken, and 90% fat-free pulled pork barbecue. That's a little sweet and a little spicy. You know, Dairy Queen doesn't use processed and